Now to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Audrey Fleming, who is a health, safety and wellbeing consultant and auditor for the British Safety Council. Businesses don't always connect the link between safety behaviour and psychological health and wellbeing, and Audrey will explore this link and provide some real clarity on best practice, helping us to better understand the difference between psychological health and safety and psychological safety. Audrey's a chartered psychologist and wellbeing and health and safety practitioner. She's got over 25 years experience across multiple sectors, from elite sport, correct me if I miss any, Audrey, to transport, to construction, manufacturing, healthcare, mechanical engineering and petrochemical. I believe I've missed out academia, haven't I? Audrey has extensive experience in supporting strategies to improving safe climate and reducing workplace stress. Great pleasure to introduce you, Audrey. Welcome.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you are. I hope you're all healthy and safe. So today I want to connect safety and well-being. Safety is obviously paramount to businesses, with your processes and procedures in place and their monitoring of your employees' safety behaviours and performance. And in more recent times, worker wellbeing has been important, with strategies and interventions planned and implemented. However, there's still that disconnect between the workplace environment, or psychosocial hazards, that I'll discuss and introduce, and the negative impact this can have on the workers' psychological health, safety and well-being, and how that can manifest through the safety behaviours and performances that you actually see. In my professional experience, I've been asked to go to sites and it's been related to safety behaviours, and then when we do our investigations, we find that there's conditions within the workplace, whether it's the environment, whether it's the relationships, whether it's the task designs, that actually have an impact and trigger the behaviours and the unsafe behaviours and performances that we actually witness. So I just want to highlight some of my experience and to bring in some increasing evidence from research within the area. So just a brief overview. As psychologists, we like to have definitions to discuss, so you've got an understanding of what we're actually talking about and the components and the processes involved. So I'll define two constructs, psychological safety and psychological health and safety, and I'll discuss how these are mixed up, can be, and the actual differences between them. I'll briefly describe the workplace psychosocial hazards. I'll put these into context through a case study, one of my professional consultancies, and I'll provide some key points that you can take away from, so that you can actually implement these within your own business and organisations. So first of all, psychological safety. I'm sure many of you have heard this term and maybe think it's just a shortening of psychological health and safety. Some of us, we might shorten health and safety within the workplace. But just to highlight that this is different. So this is more as a team element. So it's a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns or mistakes, and that the team is safe for interpersonal risk taking. So this psychological safety was actually, and I've got some references here at the bottom if you want to go and do some further reading or investigation, was Amy Edmondson was actually involved with Google. There's a project, Aristotle, and it was looking at what are the components that make a successful team, what are the team dynamics for excellence. And they came across this construct of psychological, which named psychological safety. And it was with that sort of safe environment, there was an aspect of trust, which is important. It's not just about trust within the relationships with each other, it's the trust with each other's ability. respect for different opinions, not blaming each other. So they found it has a positive on the team environment and the climate. It contributed to effective teamwork. There was positive interpersonal communication, and it enabled learning, innovation, engagement, and had a positive influence on business performance. So there was avoiding blame. You could see failure as learning, admit to not having all the ideas. And if someone came up with an idea and you didn't always agree, it was discussed, and there was no repercussions from that. So that's what psychological safety is. It's more a team dynamic. And again, your leadership can have an influence on that as well. If you can build that element of trust, respect, openness, encouraging people to be innovative and to come up with ideas, and not getting upset when things don't go to plan, and actually use it as a learning experience. If we go into psychological health and safety, this is more about aspects relating to the work design, the organisation, the management of work, and the social and environment context, that they have the potential of causing psychological, social, and physical harm. Other terms you might have heard of are psychosocial hazards. We talk about workplace stress, but maybe if we just change that slightly to workplace stressors, what are the elements within the workplace that are actually causing stress? So this diagram here on the right-hand side highlights the elements. Now, it won't always be one of these, so it won't maybe perhaps just be the task, but they'll interlink with each other. So it could be environmental, equipment, hazardous tasks. So for example, the working conditions. Perhaps, for example, some manufacturers think of the environment where you're working, the lights, the noise, the space, working in extreme environment and temperatures as well. So maybe we've got a transient workforce, and where the globe is getting smaller as well. So people are tending to move around, and they're moving into different environments that they've probably not experienced before. They could be moving to unstable environments, so there could be conflict zones. It could be places of potential with earthquakes. We've seen in the news some of these different areas in the world, and some of the conflict and the disasters that are happening. So if you're going to a workplace there or working within that environment, that can cause some concerns. There can be social aspects. We don't live in a vacuum. We interact with our surroundings. Leadership, the people that we work with. Some people are more about their career development, and there's research showing that that's what attracts people to certain different work, different jobs, is their career development, where there's flexibility there as well. The climate where we're working. Supervisors, and I'll discuss that a little bit later, are a strong component within the workplace. They're our gatekeepers and the spine of the operations. Whether you feel, going back to psychological safety there, is there elements, is there perception of trust and respect? Do you feel that work-life balance? So I mentioned there about flexibility, and I think COVID has highlighted this more, that people are looking at the work-life balance more closely. And elements of harassment and bullying within the workplace. Also, how the work is actually organised. So do we feel as if we've got job security and protection? I suppose more recently, again, with financial well-being and job security, there is a worry there, and that can have an impact on how people perceive the workplace. The job demands and control, whether that's lack of control, autonomy. So you can see that these different factors should be considered when we're designing, organising and managing the workplace, as they have an impact on the psychological, social and physical harm. So let's put this into context with safety performance. So again, we'll bring the model forward. So we've got the workplace psychosocial hazards. Now, if we don't identify these, similar as we would do with a risk assessment physically, if we do a risk assessment to look at the psychosocial hazards within the workplace, if we fail to do that over a period of time, there'll be a stress response from our workforce. That can manifest through the signs and symptoms that we might be aware of, but there could be psychological harm. That could be anxiety. We talk about burnout, you see that more often described and discussed. Depression, fatigue, PTSD, and unfortunately suicides. And again, we're still seeing a number of cases of suicides, particularly in certain industries. It can be physical harm, so again, over a period of time, if you've got the psychological perspective, as can have an impact physically as well, so over a period of time can contribute towards cardiovascular disease. If the work design isn't, so thinking about ergonomics, over a period of time can contribute towards musculoskeletal disorders. If people have got unhealthy behaviours, poor diets can lead to diabetes type 2, gastro problems, hypertension, high blood pressure, dementia, fatigue again. So you can see the link here between, over a period of time, the stress response isn't just about mental health, that over a period of time, if there's no interventions, no support, then it can manifest. But then that can also contribute to the behaviours that we see in the performances. And this is where we don't connect the link between them. So it could be individual task performance, maybe they're not performing the same way. They don't feel like performing the same way because they don't feel as if the trust and respect is there, career demands, they're not being listened to. The health and safety behaviours, and there's research, more increasing research on the link between psychosocial factors and health and safety behaviours. People are off work, linked to the mental health issues and also the physical harm that they're experiencing. Leavism, again with workload pressures, people are taking holidays but still working during the holidays, or people have had their bank holidays and come back and they feel overwhelmed with the amount of workload they've got since been off for a few days. And we have presenteeism. If people are still coming to work, they're not physically or mentally attuned, then that's going to have an impact on the productivity. And if they don't feel as if the workplace or the employees cares about them, then people are going to leave. So it's really important that as employees, as employers and as leaders, that we consider and reassess the workplace psychosocial hazards along with the physical safety risk assessments. So we want to prevent, we want to promote, and we want to protect. So it's not just a case of having your employee assistance programs and providing counselling. It's understanding that within the workplace, the work design, the people that they're working with, the supervision, the leadership can actually have a detrimental impact, and that then has an impact on the safety performances and the behaviours that we witness. So to put this into context, I want to discuss a case study. I was asked to go into a site, and the link was we're having unsafe behaviours, we have the clients not happy with our performance, our safety performance, and we're being threatened to lose a contract. In fact, we did lose one of the contracts. The other contracts were losing money. They had 4 lost time injuries within 8 months, and in a petrochem site, that's quite a significant performance. And there was increasing pressure from the client to make changes. So I was asked to go in and see how I could support them. I'd actually previously been involved with some incident investigations of the lost time injuries, so I had some knowledge already of the site. So the approach that I take might be similar to what other consultants or what other workplaces might do. So I would have a site visit to start off with. I like to go to the sites and speak to people within their environment. They feel more comfortable within their own environment. We're not sitting in the office and asking questions. You get to see their behaviours and how they react with people within their environments. You get to see the challenges that they have. So for example, in this petrochemical site, they would have some areas there was a lot of heat and steam, and there would be other areas where it was extreme frost and cold. They're exposed to the elements, so if it's raining, windy, they're exposed to these environmental factors also. So it's good to go out, see where they're actually working, get some intel of their experience, and just also introduce myself. You're starting at that point to start to build trust with them as well. They get to see who you are, you speak with them, and you build some rapport with them. I always have a questionnaire, so this was about understanding the safety climate, but I want to have some understanding of their perceptions of risk within their workplace. Every area, every site, different petrochemical sites will have their own safety climates, their own risk perceptions, and they give you a snapshot of what's going on. Also, to get better response rates from the questionnaire, and with a researcher background, I find that you want to get informed consent. So I always organise an awareness session first before any questionnaires. Small sessions, don't want to disrupt the work that's going on, so they come in probably small groups of 10 at a time, half hour. I explain to them the procedure of, I show them the model, which I'll show you in the next slide, of the factors that we measured, why these have been measured, the impact it has on them and the workplace, but also to get from them their perceptions of the risks. So we do a little exercise. I'll put them into smaller groups and we'll discuss the risk perceptions, and I'll explain to them about the questionnaire and the elements that will be measured within this questionnaire, but also the perceptions that they provide will be included within the questionnaire, so they've got some control and some knowledge of what will be in the questionnaire. Questionnaires give you the what, but not the why. So once I've analysed the data, I'll always come back and have some focus groups. I'll discuss some of the findings and just get them to give me some more information and discussion of the findings and put some context to that. Once I have all that quantitative and qualitative information, I'll produce a report and some recommendations, and any stakeholders that are involved, I'll provide a presentation. And this one in particular, the client was also involved, but we were mindful of the information that we shared as well, and I have the tendency to keep it quite sort of simple, and I'll do that as a good, better, how. So what we found was good, so starting off with the positive, what could be better, but however, we have identified some solutions. So all organised, I'll just give you a couple of examples here of the risk perceptions, the awareness session. So organised, 220 people through the week. We're going to come through off-site, the logistics of bringing them, the transportation to the sites and keeping the groups moving in between. So turned up Monday morning, 8 o'clock, and group 1 never turned up. So, but there was a misunderstanding there, but however, we did have group 2 turned up. And you can, through the discussions and the information that they provided, from each of the groups, we see which are the common themes that come up, and they select which of the perceptions, the risks, the hazards that they want to include within the questionnaire or put forward for the questionnaire. And it was explained to them that through all the different groups, we'd see what the common themes were, would come up, and these would then be put into the questionnaire. They might not have all the ones that they had selected, but what also did with the questionnaire, there was a space left, a fifth space was left, and they could, if they felt there was something wasn't included, they could include that when they were completing their questionnaire. So you can see that they were asked about common, rare, and environmental, weather, transport related hazards. The common ones, there's a tendency to be more around their trades. So if they're working at height, the type of work that they're doing, the tools, the design of the work. The rare hazards tend to be more about the environment, where they're working. So you can see here like gas leak, fires, chemicals. So that obviously relates to the sites where they're working. And there was environmental. So you can see that we're talking about the weather. We can see about the transportation around the site and other oil spillages and crossings and adverse weather, some of the other ones that come up. And just briefly here, example from day 3. So you can see some of the similarities. You can start to see that there's some common themes coming up. What I actually find from these sessions also is that they're still building trust with me, and they're telling me other things that are going on within the site. It's almost like a show and tell, if you like. They're discussing what goes on. This is maybe also triggering some of the memories and things that are going on within the site. So it's actually quite a good session. For all that it seems to be just about misperceptions, you're actually building more context to their experiences and their perceptions of what's going on within the workplace. What I find from these sessions as well, you'll always get a quick win. So, for example, they were talking about, in this particular case, about the welfare facilities. This might not seem important to some people, but if you're working out in elements and you want to get back, and water, food, shelter is a basic requirement, and you don't have those facilities, then that's going to have an impact on your performance, and it can have an impact on your mental and physical health. So the quick wins, even before a questionnaire is actually completed, I can take this information back to management and tell them some of the themes that were coming up, and they were investigating this before in between the questionnaire completion, and that also contributes as well, that they've given this information. I've went back to management and they're seeing that this is actually being done, so that actually helps me with building that trust, that when we come to complete a questionnaire, that I know that I've got their trust, the information that they're providing and their confidentiality, that I'll use that information positively. So I created this model from looking at research within industry and from some of my background as a psychologist and human performance in sport. So authentic leadership, there's a link between authentic leadership and perceptions of safety climate. Psychological capital is actually a personal resource that relates to job performance, and it's a positive state and their opinion on their own efficacies, their own abilities, and it also relates to the perceptions of the safety climate. Trust and support, safety climates measured from management level, supervisor level and individual level, looked at job satisfaction, measured well-being, and there was the 2 qualitative elements as well within the questionnaire. So risk perceptions from the sessions were put into the questionnaire, and also at the back of the questionnaire was asked for comments and suggestions. And it wasn't just a little box, and if you have anything, it was how please encourage them to include some comments and suggestions. And actual information that we got from the comments and suggestions was really very helpful, and I'll show you some examples of some of the information that was provided. And it's explained to them that these have an impact on task team performance, and that's backed up by evidence from research. I also have two versions of the questionnaire, one for the supervisors from their perspective and the operatives. And when they're completing the questionnaires, I always separate them, the supervisors from the operatives, because there's nothing worse than completing a questionnaire about someone who's sitting across from you. And that was just also to get an understanding of the workplace and from their different perspectives as well, and seeing if there was any similarities and differences between the relationships. So again, going back to the model of the psychosocial hazards, some of the findings from the sessions and from the questionnaire. So looking at environments, equipment, hazardous tasks, there's requirement for better provision of tools, harnesses and PPE. There's an example of they were using gauntlet gloves to work on hot pipes. However, it was quite difficult to screw in small bolts with these gauntlets on, and then if they were taking these off, then that was considered unsafe behaviour. The conditions of the welfare facilities that was mentioned, so about crowding and also being able to dry the coveralls. Design of scaffolding, difficult to complete. So quite often tasks, people are designed around the task round rather than the task around the person. So the scaffolding would be put up around the piping, so designed around the piping, but not really considered of how the person who was going in to maybe paint or blast that piping, how they would actually be able to get in to do their work. At this particular time, there was a concern with inaudible alarms. They have to wear ear cans because of the noise. However, there had been a fire in one of the boilers, and some that were in a certain area with a lot of noise weren't alerted, so that was a concern for them. There was perceived there was a lack of training. Some of the scaffolders were using a certain new type of scaffolding, but they didn't have training to construct this scaffolding. They felt that the supervisors had favourites. There was a lack of transparency from the supervisors. There was a blame culture from the company, but also the clients, so they felt there was a little bit caught in the middle. There was bullying, confrontations, and there was that perception of there was the blue-eyed boys, the favourites. So there was a lack of fairness. There were certain people that they considered they were favourites to get training for their career developments. Inconsistencies relating to who received overtime, they experienced animosity between the company and the clients, they felt caught in the middle, lack of communication support from the management, lack of control contributions. So they are the experts they're the tradesmen, they know what to do, but they weren't consulted. Excessive work pressure and demands, and they felt there was a lack of planning. There was perceived pressure to meet unrealistic hours targets while working in difficult environments and conditions. And if we link that to wellbeing performance, there was low level of satisfaction with the working conditions, high level of stress relating to pressure. There was higher frequency of people absent due to stress, lower expectations of positivity, optimism for the future of their job. Supervisors had low levels of self-confidence, issues with trust, low mood. So you can see the link there from this case study between the psychosocial hazards that weren't considered, but how they were having an impact on not just the well-being, but also the unsafe behaviours that the employers had concerns with. So from the questionnaires and from the focus groups, these were some of the comments that came from the operatives. So we can see here that there's pressures mentioned, the difficulty within the environments, concerns with leadership, some other comments. Some days they feel come under pressure, with one problem leads to another. This is mainly due to pressure by management, which is passed on to supervisors and then passed down to tradesmen. Jobs are being rushed, therefore corners are cut, and job may not be complete to proper standards. Access on the job is poor, feel as if they build a scaffold to suit themselves and not the men that are using it. Severe lack of power tools on site, materials not taken to job surface, job face properly. When they complain, it falls on deaf ears. To see some of the concerns there and the links to the psychosocial hazards from the operatives, but we also had the comments from the supervisors. They felt there was little planning in site due to a number of factors. Again, welfare is mentioned, time pressure, unachievable targets. Lack of teamwork. Again, mention of the equipment, the designs of the tasks. So from these, obviously we fed this back to the site, and some of the actions that came from the feedback and the recommendations. So we actually had the company MD and the Health and Safety Director visit the site to reinforce their support for making change and support to the site management that they hadn't been receiving and the workforce. And an action plan was created. So I've just got an example here. So taking the feedback, taking the recommendations, how they actually put this into some actions. And again, it's not to be overwhelmed that all the feedback you get, that you have to try and do everything all at one time. So it's, again, going back and engaging with the workforce and deciding what should be priority and how it's going to be achieved. So your SMART goals. Realised that their supervisors needed more support. So there was some frontline coaching programmes were created. They had regular meetings with the workforce. They were involved with their campaigns. And again, you can see here how these actions are put together and identified, and when goals are achieved or if goals need to be moved further back. And they actually considered what was going on in the workplace as well. So if they had their turnarounds, so the shutdowns, which are important times, so what maybe not to introduce new things at that period. The feedback they had from the client was very positive, and they agreed to be involved and collaborate with some of the actions as well. And then they went forward continued that into their second year planning as well. So you can see it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It has to take time, and there's going to be trial and error and pilots. So some of the feedback we had from the site, they felt as if things were getting better. They felt that we had had a positive interaction with them, a positive impact. And they actually saw that there was a shift change from the client as well. So some of the promises they could actually see being put into place. Some of the positive outcomes, we started to build trust. We actually had an operative and a supervisor came forward with drug misuse and abuse, which on these sites there's zero tolerance. So for them to come forward, and we actually supported them as well, so made sure that they had different roles and they were getting counselling. The team performance improves during the turnaround. They received 2 client awards. The site resilience was put to test during COVID. With them having these actions and plans in place, they actually led the other sites through the business with their continuity plans and their risk assessments. And last year, they actually won back the contract that they lost originally that's triggered for this support. So what I want you just to take away from this, just a couple of points here. So consider the safety behaviours you see as not causes, but as symptoms and signs. Gain some understanding from your workforce's perceptions of their working conditions, and consider designing the task around the person rather than the person around the task. Ask and listen to your workforce. They're your technical experts. They've got the knowledge and the experience. They've got the hands-on, the daily of the trials and errors. So they've got a wealth of talent, knowledge, skill there. So why not use that? Why not utilise it and get them involved? Support your supervisors. They're your gatekeepers and the spine of your daily operations. They might have the technical abilities, but they don't always have the non-technical. So helping them with their leadership, their communication, with decision making, give them the support that they need, because they also have an impact on the psychological and social well-being of your employees. So it's very important that you support your supervisors. Don't be afraid to do pilot studies and learn from what worked and what didn't work. And yes, you've got your technical ability there, but you don't always have that internally. So don't be afraid to get some external support and guidance, for example, from the British Safety Council or other organisations or consultants. Take their advice, whether that's a little support or for them to take you through a culture change. Know that there's people there that can support you and guide you along your journey. So I just want to finish with this statement here. Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take your questions. Or if you want to connect on LinkedIn, just use the QR code. Thank you.
Audrey, thank you. Almost felt a bit immediate faux pas then of remaining on mute. But Audrey, thank you. That really, really insightful. There were lots of questions that came through there. I'm going to pick up on a couple. Like I mentioned earlier, all the questions will be collated and then sent out to delegates afterwards anyway. But Audrey, a couple of really key questions I think came through here is one is, in your experience, would you say that for an organisation whose safety performance seems to have plateaued, should they start to consider psychological health and safety, i.e. psychosocial impacts, in a bid to drive improvements in safety performance?
Yeah, definitely. As I've highlighted within the case studies, and there's actually the link to the paper which just came out this year. It's actually specifically linking the psychosocial hazards to the safety performances, to safety behaviours. So for example, if someone perceives that job demands, so whether they've got a lack of control or there's the pressure, it can actually trigger the impairment to their well-being, their mental health, and then that can have an impact. The mind's not in the game as such, and that can have be distracting, and that can have an impact on the performance. And we don't always link that to the environment to the outcomes that we observe.
Thank you. And I think the difference there that you've made, the clear distinction between psychological safety and workload stress is really, really critical. I know that I still come across organisations that still struggle to see the difference between the two, so thank you for that. There's quite a few observations around whether the British Safety Council runs their own stress risk assessment type model. Do you want to just briefly elaborate on that? And of course, also just touch on the legal duty of care around identification and mitigation of workload stress.
Yeah. So again, it's distinguishing between and realising that work-related, we talk about workplace stress, and it's great that a lot of employers are looking at employee assistance programmes so that they can have access to counselling. But however, there's more research highlighting that organisations are saying, well, we're putting this money into EAP, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it and how it is a tertiary provision. However, it's not dealing with the lack of control within the workplace, the lack of support. You go to your supervisor and you say, I'm expected to train someone and do my job at the same time and meet these targets, and it's unachievable, and it's that they're not getting the response they're looking for, and over a period of time that will have an impact. So that then relates to the workplace stressors. And going back to the risk assessment, there is, by law, you shouldn't be just risk assessing the physical, you should be risk assessing the welfare, which is the well-being of your workforce. So there is a legal obligation there to assess the risk of stress, your psychosocial factors within the workplace. I suppose it doesn't seem that clear.
Thanks, Audrey. Another question that really piqued my interest was around, should we, in terms of us as an organisation better understanding the key challenges we have on the ground with our workforce? Again, it loops back to, sometimes we don't always know what we don't know, which is quite an interesting observation from this individual. In terms of best approaches, is it better to use independent experts to undertake things like surveys, focus groups, or are there advantages to doing some of those things internally?
Yeah, well, I can give you an example from, I've actually been internal and been an external consultant, if you like. What I've found is, and again, this is quite a generalisation, so I don't want to offend anyone, quite often we're quite good at getting questionnaires, and we'll put the questionnaires out, and when we get the information back, we don't know what to do with the data. And even as a researcher, sometimes you get the information and it can be quite difficult to analyse. So I would suggest that you've went to that enthusiasm and collaboration to engage with your workforce, but make sure you also have the support. So whether that is you have experts within your workplace, but I would highly recommend to maybe have external. The other of that is you've got someone who's unbiased, that there's no prior relationship. So sometimes people's perception is, oh, they're asking us to put in another questionnaire and what do we actually get from it? And I've actually found with going to sites, doing awareness sessions, you're building up that trust rapport, you're taking them on the journey, that when it comes to the questionnaire, when it comes to focus groups, they're on that journey with you, and they feel as if they've got ownership of it, and you get better responses, you get better outcomes. And then when you want to put your actions in place, you've got that motivation. So I would suggest externally.